Welcome to Recruitment Mindset. Our mission is to serve you with bold conversations about business, recruitment, leadership, and personal development. Open your mind and prepare for discovery, creation, and transformation. And here's your host, Ross Cunningham.
So hi and welcome, it's Ross Cunningham here, your host with the Recruiter Mindset podcast. Today I'm super excited to have Anthony Astbury from the Whole Men Academy. And today we're talking about how to become a whole man. There's a number of takeaways that you've received during this podcast for your listening pleasure, and I really hope you tune in to further episodes to learn more about the journey of the Whole Men Academy. So Anthony, first of all, just to kick off, do you just want to introduce yourself, please?
Certainly, Ross, thanks for that, and good intro. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Whole Man Academy. I spent 20 years working in the city and left for let's call it a life of more fulfilment, and started the Whole Man Academy 2 years ago with my co-founder, Matthew Shaw, who's the BBC News editor. Yeah. And we have grown it into an initiative where we encourage guys to get together, which started just in London, but now thankfully is slowly spreading around the world.
Which is fantastic. I think I've been monitoring and watching the Whole Man Academy for a while. And what's interesting, you did mention there's a number of different listeners that tune into what you're doing at the Whole Man Academy. Can you just quickly talk us through that before we go into the key points of this podcast, please?
Yeah, I mean, our journey's been a slow one, because we've all got full-time jobs. Yeah. And in a way, when we first did the Whole Man Academy event, firstly, we didn't even know if anybody would come to it, because guess what? Guys getting together doesn't happen very often at all. And since then, our journey's taken us from live events. And prior to the joyous lockdown, we actually had already been planning to do a podcast, but we kind of rushed it through as soon as everybody was stuck at home. And what that's done, of course, is, it sounds so obvious, but it's increased our reach. You know, the difficulty with the events was, of course, a guy needs to be able to get to London on the day, maybe get, I don't mean permission from his partner, but be okay with it, etc., etc. And whereas a podcast, of course, you can listen to it on the toilet if you need to, and you can, anybody in the world. So our analytics show that we've had, primarily, obviously it's from the UK, but I mean, we've had people from roughly 15 different countries listening. And it seems a bit strange sometimes that, these guys in all these different countries are listening to the content we're putting out. But of course, it's great because it increases the reach. And, why shouldn't they benefit from the stuff we're putting out?
Yeah, and one of the things that I found really interesting with your reach, where it's went global, was the female listeners that are tuning into the show as well. Can you just talk me through that? Because sometimes when we mention Whole Men Academy, there's actually some ladies out there that are looking to understand more about men. And just talk us through that bit. Yeah,
no, it's a good point. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a surprise to us, but it was interesting to see that, after even maybe, and we were up to now kind of 20 episodes of the podcast, that it was around kind of 27% of the listeners were female. Yeah. And of course I remember when I was sitting in the offices of the London Sock Company, who are one of the companies who were sponsoring us. And at the time I was speaking to them about marketing. And of course, back then they said to me, remember that, a lot of our audience is female, because of course their luxury socks are generally bought by females who are buying them as presents for their dad, son, partner, etc. And we're getting that obviously with ourselves, the realization that we need to, be aware of 25% of our audience are female, and maybe tap into what they want to hear about men and how they can understand them more. I mean, you can't understand men just as much as we can't understand women. That's a hamster wheel to nowhere. I understand myself sometimes. But we can try. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. I think for the listeners on this podcast today, there's three things that we discussed that we want to be sharing. The first one was to understand your thoughts and how to control these feelings. The second one was, I've lost it there. Mate. I will come back to that. So the first one was understand your thoughts and control your feelings. The second one was importance of talking. Do you know, I didn't even write that down, mate. That's how nervous I was. Sorry about that. Okay, just crack on. Here's the best thing you can do.
Yep.
Is not edit this.
Oh, shit, man.
Who cares if you fuck up?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Do you know what? And it makes you a normal human being.
It does, mate. It does. It does. Okay, so minus the fuck up then, Anthony.
Yep.
So the three things we want to pass over to the listeners today is one, understanding your thoughts and controlling your feelings. The second one is why it's important to talk, and I do believe that myself. And the third one was understand it takes time.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep. Okay.
Being okay that things take time.
So
Do you want me to jump into the first one?
Yeah, jump into the first one, understanding your thoughts and controlling your feelings.
Yeah, I mean, this comes from, we've actually recently had him on the podcast. There's a guy called David Key, who is a life coach, and he had an event a few years ago, which was a full week event at Nebworth House, which was a fantastic venue. And what I learned there was very much about coaching and the mindset. And we learned NLP, and I nearly said ventriloquism. That's not. It's something completely different. But what we did learn was about the three principles, and that being mind, consciousness, and thought.
Yeah.
And I would encourage listeners to go away and investigate a guy called Sid Banks, who was I believe, a Scottish welder who had an insight at a certain point in his life. I won't go through the whole story, but the important takeaway, if you had one from that, and it sounds so eye-wateringly simple, but I think it's something that could change people's lives in an instant if you get it, is that your thoughts control your feelings.
Good.
And people will say, yeah, I know. And you say, but do you know? Do you understand that you get to choose how you feel?
Yep. And I think sometimes subconsciously, when it comes to how you think and feel, sometimes not aware of that. It's like that analogy of driving a car and then you realize, how did I even get here?
Yeah.
Well, that'd be quite nice to drive your car at the moment. And unfortunately, with this lockdown, we don't get the chance. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I think your thoughts, you can see it in your mind and you can see it in your hands, essentially. And I think you've got to find a way in how you can actually control these thoughts and behaviors, which in return can help you develop.
I mean, that's the thing. As you said, it's an awareness. Now, the way I use it as an example, when someone asks me, well, what exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Last year, my nan passed away. Okay. So if you gave me a minute or two to think about my nan, or showed her some pictures and maybe played the Johnny Mathis beautiful tune that we played at a funeral, I guarantee that I will burst into tears. So what's happened? I wasn't focusing on her and the situation and the sadness and the good times, etc. But I've now diverted all my attention to it. And what has that done? It's created a reaction in me, and suddenly I'm crying. So of course we know that what you're focusing on is going to affect how you feel.
That's good. It's good. And I think for the listeners as well, what I'd like to ask you, Anthony, in terms of mindset, what tools would you use to actually work through that process and keep you super sharp focused along that journey?
Good question. I think one of them is firstly just educating yourself on the slightly deeper level of what that actually means. So, I mean, Sid Banks has written some great books that are very thin. Some of the greatest books in the world are those that are not these huge kind of textbook ones, but are actually quite thin. And just educating yourself on it and understanding a little bit more about the three principles. Because when you get it, you'll kind of look up at the sky and think, my world has been changed or transformed. And I like the fact that it sounds very dramatic, because if you have that insight, then your life will dramatically change.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say if you get pissed off, that's fine. You can't help how you feel in an instant. But for me, I've got 2 kids and I'm at home at the moment with my partner, and we're recording podcasts and kids are knocking on the door and we're having all the fun of it. But generally through life, we all react to things. Yeah. But actually having that understanding of, oh, hold on a minute, I've just got up in my head about something, but I get to decide if I'm pissed off or not.
Yeah, it's good. It's a very good point. And it's funny that you mentioned about the kids and family. I've had to send my family out just to do this podcast today, and I feel quite bad for it. But
Banished.
The thing is that my wife's so understanding, and she knows the journey that we're all on, because we're all part of it as a family. And it's like you and your family, you're part of this journey together. And that's what I want to ask as well before we move on to the second point. When it comes to your own personal development, how long have you been on this journey for? And when did you find something significant that transformed it for you, and starting the Whole Men Academy in 2018?
Around a year before I left working in the city, and in my last role I was doing liquid petroleum gas shipping derivatives, and I set up the kind of trading desk for that. which sounds more spectacular than it was. And it actually, probably even before that, I was working doing carbon emissions broking and then fuel oil broking. And I had become mildly disillusioned with what I was doing because it was a fairly toxic atmosphere that you were in. You know, I've spoken on different podcasts about the fact that, you know, your sole job really was to make as much money as possible, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was very much one day you might make loads of money and you're the hero, and the next day you make zero and your mindset has shifted to one of disappointment and frustration. And the next day it might be good, bad, etc. So I started listening to podcasts, and it was actually my partner Emma that got me into podcasts, and she said, "Oh, you should listen to this podcast." It was a guy called James Swanwick and another chap called Andy Murphy, who started talking about mindset and also about Tony Robbins. And I thought, this guy sounds interesting. So we were lucky enough to have a fair amount of cash in the bank, so it didn't matter how much we spent on our personal development journey.
Yep.
And Emma and I went straight to the Tony Robbins event in London at Unleash the Power Within. Okay. And then I signed up for the Life and Wealth Mastery and Date with Destiny. That was in Miami. Yep. And that kind of really got me started, podcasts and then Tony Robbins.
Fantastic. It's quite interesting because my journey myself, I remember I attended an event in 2003, and it was called Columba 1400. And I had the great opportunity through my work at that time to go on this journey. And for me, it was the first step of transformation in terms of my thoughts, my mind, how to control these things. And then the journey went on to having the opportunity to go over to America and watch some of the amazing authorities in the world of personal development. Because I think it's very important, Anthony, what I've seen obviously through your journey and through the things that you've been doing, you've got to walk your own path as well. You know, you do tend to find there's a lot of people that might talk that good game. I think you have to walk through it to really understand you as an individual and how you can control yourself and your emotions, keeping them intact. Even when you have that roller coaster ride of emotions, when things are going well and you hit crash rock bottom, you've got to be able to control that.
Yeah, you're right. I think I've always been a fairly calm and mildly level-headed individual, but the understanding that I now have and the insight that I had means that I'm able to cope with pretty much any situation in a good manner.
Yeah.
And actually, you're right about walking your own path. I think a lot of people can get bogged down with personal development and jump from person to person, guru to guru, book to book, blah blah blah. My advice on that is always for people is find one person and stick with. You know, let's look at Richard Branson. You know, if you read everything that he's ever written or podcast or interview, what have you, and book he's written, I'm pretty sure that you'll come out of it, you know, with a great frame of mind and a real kind of new level of business knowledge. Look at Tony Robbins. If you read everything that he'd written and all his films, podcasts, etc., you'll transform yourself.
You will. And I think that the big part of that transformation, and it's great to learn. I'm a big fan of personal development journey, but you've got to take immediate action. Yeah. You've got to take action. Like, so for example, and I think we had this conversation, I would read books before, but I would never take notes of certain key points in the book. And what I found is actually I was reading these books, but I wasn't actually recording the great takeaways. And I think that's extremely important, that when you are doing things like reading books or focusing on the one person that can help you move forward with your journey, take moments to think about what that really means to you, and then start implementing it with immediate action in your life, and then you'll see that will be transformational.
No, you're totally right, and it's because people see personal development, and there's nothing wrong with it, but see it as entertainment. I mean, you can watch YouTube videos and get motivated and pumped up, and then go, right, turn it off. That was good entertainment, and carry on with something. So you're right. It's about, we're all on our own path, journey, whatever you want to call it. And some people need to take drastic action. Some people just aren't ready.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And I think that I could certainly say that I've been on that journey myself. There's been times where I felt ready. There's been times where I've tried to be ready, but it's not quite happened yet. And I think it's then just something just clicks, something clicks in that mindset. I am ready to take this on board now and go for it. And I think that's just, it cuts away the procrastination or the feeling of failing or whatever it may be to hold you back. There's lots of these things. And I think in our great book for listeners is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Yep. It's a fantastic book, which I'll send in the link details below. But that kind of moves us on to the second point. which we want to share with our listeners today, and that's the importance of talking. Do you just want to talk me through your journey and your story with that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you work in a city for a long time, you don't really, and probably like most guys, it doesn't matter what sector you're working in.
Yeah.
You have, and I tried to call it the other day, high level conversation. And what I mean is not that it's highly intellectual, but it's not deep conversation with people. And of course, your stock response is, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm yeah, good. And most people wouldn't even say I'm not feeling great, let alone anything that's deeper than that. And that comes from, the whole ethos of the Whole Man Academy was encouraging guys to get together to talk. And now the interesting thing there is, we're not saying that everybody should get together and talk. If you don't want to, don't do it. Yeah. I mean, I remember when we first started, there was a guy had commented on one of our tweets saying, "Oh, all you're doing is trying to turn all men into women because they just want to talk all the time." And I said, well, quite frankly, that's the attitude that's not helping guys, full stop. But you're right. If you don't want to, then no one's forcing you to. But our events are encouraging guys to get together, learn from each other. And we call it kind of learning from each segment of a man. So you've got the, let's say, the finances, his health, his fitness, which is different to health, his career, his relationships, his sex life, his appearance, his ability to dress, cook, etc., etc., etc. These are all segments of the pie of man, which we're trying to bring each of those levels up for a guy if he wants to.
You've already overwhelmed me just outlining that. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So that's great. That pie illustration that you've mentioned is fantastic for the listeners when they're looking at their own personal journey in life. What sort of tips would you provide in managing to spin all these plates? Because I know when it comes to being a family man with 2 kids, you've got that part to have a focus in. Yeah. You've got to make the tea sometimes, do the dishes, have those adult conversations as well, which sometimes can be missed when you've got a child. How do you work through that? Just share me some insights, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of us, if you took someone through the segments of the pie of man, as we want to call it, I mean, you could call it the wheel of life. We can dress it up as whatever you want. But of course, some people are doing better at those, and some people are less interested. Some people don't care about their fitness. Some people don't care about their health and finances. So it's all very individual, of course. But I always think a lot of them we're doing well in already. It's just about saying, do you know what? It's hard to bring all of them up. Let's say they're all 7 out of 10. Yeah. If you say, do you know what? At the moment, I just want to bring one of them up to a higher level, then you can focus on that. But the rest, you're spinning these plates anyway, because if you weren't, then we'd be dead, because you wouldn't have your health or you'd be broke and you'd have no career and all the different things that go with it. So it's about saying, you haven't always got to improve all of them at the same time. They're all ticking over. And if one is really important to improve, focus on that one first.
Just a quick one as well, just for the listeners. In terms of that pie of man, do you have like a template that could be accessed, that could be sent out to potential listeners that could maybe help them?
That's a good question. Yep. We're working on it. We want to have, I mean, we know now the game has changed, and again, we'd plan to have online courses anyway, but we want to make sure we get them right, not just have an online course for the sake of an online course. Yeah. I've taken enough in my time where some of them are great and some of them are crap. Yeah. Therefore, we're trying to take our time over it, and I think it's just important for guys to realise that it's okay for some of those segments not to be doing so well, and that comes down to when Matt and I started the Whole Man Academy. It came from sitting down in Soho House having a cocktail and maybe several glasses of wine and discussing. Matt was interested in the mental health side. I was interested in the mindset, which of course, that all kind of links together. But what we realized was what was the big question for everybody in business should be, what's the problem I'm trying to solve?
Oh, love that.
And for us, it was that guys don't feel okay to get together to talk. But what is that? The problem is there isn't space to get together to talk. Yeah. And that's what we are not trying to, but are providing through previously live events, through a podcast, through the discussion on that, through our live Zoom calls, through our social media, and trying to encourage guys to learn more about themselves and do life better.
It's good. It's good. I do remember I did a wee bit of searching myself as a man. I was looking online on YouTube and I was looking at some TEDx talks, and a good lady, Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yes, great TED talk she did.
Fantastic TED talk on vulnerability. And I think, when it comes to this point, importance of talking, we do need to open ourselves up a wee bit and just share how we're actually feeling. Because do you know something? There's nothing wrong with that. And I think it helps you build and grow along your journey as well. And that probably, one of the things that stood out, Anthony, on your journey with the Whole Men Academy, like to have David Gandy as a global ambassador and a guy that loves the philosophy of what you guys are doing in terms of just talking, having that share of talk amongst men. But just talk me through that, because I think that's an amazing success that you've had there.
Yeah, it's something that, honestly, if you'd have said when we first started the Whole Man Academy that was going to happen, I'd have laughed. But, through the right people, we got in contact with David, and yes, thankfully he, you can't not like what we're trying to do. I mean, what is there not to like about encouraging guys to get together to lead better lives and a life of more purpose and fulfillment? So I remember back when we were sponsored by Geese and Hawks, obviously the Savile Row suit tailor, which was fantastic itself, and they kindly said they'd throw us a party, let's say a launch party.
You throw me a suit?
Well, I do have a lovely suit from them, which is very, very kind of them to give me. But the funny thing with that was they said, we'll throw this launch party, and I thought they meant for 30 or 40 guys, and we were like, brilliant, that's fantastic. And then we kind of scratched the surface, said, what kind of numbers are we talking here? And they were like, up to 200 people. And you're like, okay, fair enough, that's interesting. So we held this big launch event back in March last year, and really it was just launching the initiative itself. But we had Jeremy Vine there, and Gabby Roslin there, and celebrity chefs and singers and bankers and traders and photographers. A whole mixture of people, and Paralympic gold medalists and life coaches and all these different people. And just prior to that, I'd said, would David come to our launch party? Because we knew that would, I always call it, get bums on seats. That would really make people stand up and take notice. And he replied back and said he was in somewhere like Beijing or somewhere, being on the front cover of shoot for a magazine. I think it was GQ. And of course I was just a little bit disappointed, but then he came back and said, is there anything else I can do?
Wow. And
of course we said, well, we'd love to get you to come and speak at one of our events. And I really mean this, I'm 41 or 42 now. I'm not quite sure which one. But when I received the email that had said, right, David said, yep, put him front and center. He'll come to, and we'll do another event at Geese and Hawks, and he'll come and speak to all the guys. It was one of those moments that maybe don't get where it sounds sad, but you're just like, yes, because I knew that was, that was a big thing for us, and he did, and that was our biggest event, 65 guys in the room, and it was something I'll always remember.
Yeah, and I think as well, with the Whole Men Academy, to have such an icon like David Gandy to be an ambassador, I just think, it is amazing. It's an amazing part of the journey that you guys are on, and it's great that he's part of that journey as well, which I think is phenomenal from my point of view. So congratulations to you and the team. I think it's an amazing job done.
That's why it's a funny one though, because many people know who David is, but some people don't, and it's like a lot of celebrities. We've had an example, one of the guys from Strictly Come Dancing who came to one of our other events, funny enough, at Geese and Hawks. Yeah. And I don't really watch it, although I know what it is and I've seen it a bit. But, for me, I couldn't name any of the dancers.
Yeah.
But when Kevin Clifton came in, who's a lovely guy, and we really appreciated him taking the time out of his busy schedule to come to one of our events. And it was just funny because you've got... I'm able to chat to him normally because I see him as a normal guy, and guess what? He is a normal guy. But of course, one or two of the people were like, "Fuck, it's Kevin Clifton!" Like, my wife's going to wet herself when she knows I'm here with him, and and I'm talking to him. And I guess that's the same with David Gandy. He is very famous, but some people you speak to will say, "Oh, I don't know who you're talking about," and other people go, "What, David Gandy?" And he is one of the most influential men on the planet, especially on the style side of it. And he's been on I think one of his big campaigns when he was in Times Square on the billboard just in his pants. I'm not sure if any of us are planning on doing that soon.
Certainly not me. I do love his PJs though. I think his jammies that he endorsed with M&S at a time were fantastic. I still wear them today. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing is, he crosses the divide of, obviously he's in the luxury brand, but he's actually a very nice guy, normal chap. He's got a young daughter.
Yeah.
He was living very close to me up here for a while. And, the last time when we met up and had a drink, it's funny because you talk about dad stuff for the first 40 minutes before you say, oh yeah, we're supposed to be talking about the Whole Man Academy.
Oh, that's awesome. That's nice. I think that's very important. I think sometimes we can miss that in the journey, Anthony. Is just actually getting to know somebody truly, asking questions about, your family, kids, how do you manage that in terms of parenthood as a father and so forth. And I think it's really, really good to get to know people on that same level, because sometimes the way things are pushed out in media and icon status and all these things, it can be a wee bit intimidating, I would imagine. But once you break all these things down, we're just human beings at the end of the day, all on different journeys.
And you're right, we are all on different journeys. And, for the Whole Man Academy, as much as any business, we're still, nothing's ever set in stone as to what we can or can't do, which is why it's nice when you own your company, because no one's telling you what to do. But having David Gandy, backing us and being our first global ambassador, as I said, I always use the term gets bums on seats. It also makes people sit up and take notice, because even for, a lot of people might have seen something about the Whole Man Academy and like, oh right, I don't. But suddenly when you see that David Gandy is the global ambassador, and David's got, 1 million followers on Instagram and et cetera, and probably been on more front covers than any man on the planet, people go, oh, and they pay attention. And attention means that more guys see what we're doing and women, and therefore it raises the level of awareness and people see our initiative. And, that's exactly what we're after.
No, it's great. It's awesome. I love it. I love everything that you guys are doing. And that probably brings us on to really the last takeaway point, which is like, having the patience that things take time. Now, I have a running conversation with my own personal mentor about this, that things always take longer. They always cost more. And you need to knock away the frustrations of just being patient in the process. Do you just want to talk me through that? Because that's one of your values, is understanding that things take time. Certainly.
I think that probably for us all, if you go back in life to your younger years, sometimes, like we say, if you knew then what you knew now, you might do things differently.
Yeah.
But even on my own journey, I started working at Glencore when I was pretty much 18. I was absolutely fucking clueless as to what I was doing there. On the day I turned up, I couldn't even remember the name of the lady who was going to be my boss, which I think is a really pretty powerful start. But, even at that point, I had no real plan. But then you move to creating good relationships with people. And as we know, you can't, as Steve Jobs said, you can't connect the dots going forward. So it's about actually just not worrying too much about what's, in the future, and only knowing necessarily what the next step is.
It's good.
And especially that can help with overwhelm. I mean, if you're, for a lot of people, if you're stuck in life and you're not sure what to do, or you're working on a project, as opposed to worrying about, I don't know how to complete the whole thing, just knowing what is the next step can be really beneficial for you. And that's what we've had to implement with the Whole Man Academy. Again, when we started, it was, look, let's just do an event, see who comes along. If no one comes along, we'll do another one. But they did. We had 25, 26 people, guys. And then what should we do? Well, let's set up an Instagram account, and let's do this, and let's do that, and let's ask someone for sponsorship. And it grows and grows and grows. But you could never have made all this stuff up.
Yeah, it's really quite funny that, because I was on social media this week and I was sharing, obviously, a story about this podcast, and this is a journey that's beginning. And I was saying I'm looking to do some recorded versions first before we go live, because obviously there will be fuck-ups, there will be mistakes made. And this comment I received on LinkedIn, which was, just go now, just do it. So I says, okay, let's go live on Friday.
Yep.
And so we're waiting to see if she'll come back and give us that opportunity. So, it's just taking the opportunity as well. Sometimes, it's right. You need to do it. Just get out there and now. And sometimes we can let things like overwhelm get in front of us when we're trying to do things correctly, do it properly and so forth. You want to make sure that people that are listening to this podcast are getting a great experience on the journey, but also valuable takeaways to actually use or implement into their own lives if they want that, which I think is important.
Well, Ross, you just hit on an important point for people listening, or both of the people that will listen to this. Is that again, waiting till you're ready. Generally, is just procrastination. And I know there's trying to think what the saying was, but if you wait until you're ready to launch, it's too late. Yeah. And even at our Whole Man Academy party, someone who wanted to, which they didn't end up doing it, but feature us on one of their kind of podcasts, and it was a really big UK wide podcast, and I was quite excited about it, and it didn't happen for various reasons. Yeah. But he said that to me at the time, so I said, "Oh, well, can we wait? Give it a couple of months and let me." And he was like, "Listen, if you wait to launch, it'll be too late by then."
Yeah.
And like with the going live thing, who cares if you make mistakes?
Yeah.
If people don't like it, then switch off. But if you have a perfectly polished episode, for me, that tells me what's the stuff you've cut out.
Yeah, maybe it's too polished. It's not been authentic, like you're saying earlier.
Yeah,
it's quite funny because something you said earlier, when you're asked the question like, "How are you?" I've kind of changed that myself in the way I speak to someone. I say, "How have you been?"
Yeah.
And the reaction's always totally different. Rather than "How are you?" "How have you been?" You tend to get a different response to that rather than just "I'm fine."
Because people aren't used to it, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. I have to think about it."
Yeah, and I do find that very useful. And one thing one of my friends said to me as well about diary management, when you say to someone, "Okay, let's book in that appointment," just do it there and then. Okay, let's book it now. Not let's book in the appointment. Let's just get it done now. It's just taking that immediate action, which I'm a big advocate of.
Well, that you can go on podcasts just talking about, let's call it time management. I mean, you can't manage time, but you can manage what you're doing in the 24 hours of the day. Yeah. I'm still looking for 28-hour days at the moment, but I'm failing in that one. But it's important for people.
Anthony, it sounds insane. We'll have 24 hours.
An extra 4 hours just to do stuff. But as you said, that's because a lot of things just take longer than you think.
They do. And I think on the journey as well, that's a really good point you're making, because, if I could add on some hours, that'd be fantastic. I'd spend that certainly with the family more. But I think you've also got to build your network and also let people help you on your journey, because there's some people that have better skills than what you are capable of at this point in your life, and vice versa, you have better skills than them. And I think when you find that middle ground point, where you can both help each other to move forward in your journeys, it's like gold.
Yeah.
That is gold in itself.
The other thing I think, and you mentioned it earlier, is either having your own coach or mentor.
Yeah.
And now, the difference between those is a coach shouldn't be telling what to do. They're asking you questions to extract the knowledge that you've got and the actions that you can take inside you. A mentor is, I've been there, done it. I can help you not make fuck ups, or if you do, minimize the damage from those and work through what you're doing.
Yeah, it's good. It's really, really good. Okay, so that's us pretty much covered the three sort of golden takeaways. See, from the Whole Men Academy point of view, now I've been monitoring this journey, and I think what you guys are doing is absolutely fantastic. It's great for the man's mind. It's great for the women's mind as well. There's a lot of great insights for both parties at the table. What is the one thing you would say for your experience, the journey has been the biggest takeaway that you've seen so far for your members that are part of the Whole Men Academy? Putting you on the spot, sorry.
No, it's good, and because there's a couple of thoughts, but one of them I think maybe is the actual, from the personal side of it. We were and we are just a couple of guys with full-time jobs who are trying to make a difference, which sounds a bit wanky, but that's what we're doing. Yep. And it's realizing that going back to, you don't have to know everything to kind of make a start. The journey that we're on, it's still weird for me now when I might WhatsApp David Gandy or Charlie King from Towie or various famous people, and it's become the norm that you've got a hugely expanding network of people who become your friends, maybe business partners, maybe you'll do some kind of JV with them.
Yeah.
And it's realizing that we are just normal guys, and we've managed to create something which is making a difference. So for any of those guys that are on the journey with us, who are subscribed to our e-letter or come to our events, you're like, listen, if there's something that you want to do, just get started with it.
Good.
And if you're not sure, ask us, because we're not experts. We're making up as you go along. That's the important point, is you don't have to do it all on your own. Find someone and they'll help you.
And see, with that JV part, the joint venture part that you were talking about, I think that's critically important, because it's very easy, especially during these different times, it's very easy to lock yourself away. and not reach out for that support. And I think I'm going to ask you what your 3 recommendations to books are in a minute. But
Yeah.
I think the power of asking correctly is a good place to start, because if your why is big enough, we've read the books, but if your why is big enough, if you're loving what you're doing, you've got pure purpose set around what you're trying to achieve, that's going to attract people to you, and that will attract them to help you as well in the journey, which is vitally important as well. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I'd add to that something you said earlier, which is about authenticity.
Yep.
And going back to us two joking about the podcast and saying, guess what? Most of us will make various mistakes, and sometimes it can make you nervous being on podcasts. And we had a guy who, is a fairly famous chap who's probably been on hundreds of podcasts. And at the end of it the other day, he still said to me, "Oh, do you think my answer was all right there? Or do you think, do you think I should?" And I was like, "Who cares? Like, just doesn't matter. Like, if that's what you think and that's how you said it, that's called real life." And of course, if you're going to do live stuff, there isn't no edit. There isn't editing. There isn't, "Oh, actually, let's just stop and do that." If you need to go for a wee, you either wet yourself or off you go.
Yeah,
so you deal with it, or you keep a little bottle down there.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. And I think as well, stuff like this, putting on podcast shows, whatever you're putting out on social media, if it's just the one thing that you can take away that's been of use, then I think that's a great achievement from going through this experience anyway.
Yeah.
And certainly the one thing that I've realised on this podcast today with yourself, Anthony, is just get it done. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't procrastinate, and just take that action now. And it's been absolutely fantastic.
And tell everybody what you're doing.
Absolutely. You've got to share and market yourself. What a time to market yourself and what you're doing.
I mean, for you, we've got a new podcast, you've got a new podcast. And I can't remember what podcast it was I was listening to, but the guy said, imagine a few years ago, if someone said, "Listen, my uncle owns a media company, and all you need to do is record yourself, and he's going to distribute to the whole world on audio, on visual, on audio books, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Streamcast, on etc., YouTube, what have you." And you'd be like, "Wow, this is amazing." And you're like, "Well, it's all free. It's right there in front of you." Yeah. So, just make a start on it.
Yeah, I think making the start is 100%. You're absolutely correct. And there's a ton of stuff for people to tap into, and just make sure that you've got an open mind. I think having that open mind to see what is out there, what can help you, and what you choose to focus on is definitely good advice. But I just want to say, before we bring this podcast to a close, Anthony, what 3 books would you recommend? Your 3 best books? I like to ask anybody that I interview the same question. Sorry.
It's a good question. The first one is called Goals by Brian Tracy.
Yep. Okay. Love it.
And what I love about it is firstly, it's so simple.
Yep.
Secondly, it's really difficult because a lot of people don't have a clue what their goals are. And even if you give them a day, they really struggle to think about them. But I think they're very important. And also the amount of people that will say, "Yeah, I'm going to work on it," but they get about a quarter way through a very simple book and can't be bothered and will move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And the importance there is actually saying, "Do you know what? I'm going to work through the book. It might take you months, but work through and work out what your goals are and see what comes up."
It's great.
The second book would be, I think it's called The Enlightened Gardener by Sid Banks.
Okay.
And that's Sid, SYD, I think.
I'm just taking notes. Yep.
Yeah. And on that, I mean, any book by Sid Banks, to be honest, is great.
I haven't read any of his books actually, but I will be exploring this. So thanks for that golden takeaway.
Yeah, and honestly, it's there's a message in every book, and if you get it, then you'll get it.
Yeah.
The last one actually, to go off of, not so much off of personal development, but is Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography.
Yep. Love it.
And his story, whether you like him or not, his story is incredible. Starting off as a young boy where he grew up to becoming, not just the movie star, but everything that he's become, and governor of California. I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
You can. I've watched some of his stuff on YouTube. It's phenomenal. His journey. That story is amazing. And
if you read that book, I learned such a lot about, not just about him, but it just makes you think. And he's a personal development guru, even though he doesn't pretend he is, if that makes sense. Yeah. And there's some brilliant takeaways from that book.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, Anthony, I just want to say thank you very much for your time and your contribution on the Recruiters Mindset podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and I think some of the questions that you've answered and also the information you've shared today will be very helpful to our audience that are out there. So thank you so much for that. Is there anything final you would like to add before we bring this podcast to a close?
Thanks for that. I mean, that's the important thing of the podcast. It's not just people having a nice chat, which is all very well, but you want people hopefully to take some golden nuggets or action points away. What I'd love people to do is just have a look at our Whole Man Academy website or Instagram. And if you are interested in keeping in touch with us on the Whole Man Academy website, you can subscribe to our magical e-letter, which goes out each week, which all the tickets, invitations, competitions, etc., all get sent out via that e-letter.
That's fantastic, and I think it's a great point there. I'll certainly send this information out to the audience that have listened in, and I'm more than happy to share your amazing journey. And thank you so much for doing this episode of Becoming a Whole Man. I think it's been really interesting, the takeaways that you've provided today, and I'm sure the listeners will agree with that. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great week.
Thank you, Ross.
Take care.
Thank you. You've been listening to the Recruitment Mindset Podcast with Ross Cunningham. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and Ross will look forward to serving you in the next episode. Until then, take care and be great. Here's wishing you amazing success.